Welcome back to the Mohawk Valley Sports Watch. Thanks for making us part of your Saturday morning. Catch us live right here every Saturday morning on WKAL Talk Radio 1450. Pags, you got Coach on?
We got Coach on.
All right, let's go to Coach Pasiak now. Hey, Coach, good morning. How are you?
Doing great. How you guys doing today?
Doing fantastic. Listen, we appreciate you as always, Coach.
It's great to talk with you again.
So, Coach, I want to get into a few things. Before we get into some of the NBA games, I want to get into, the NBA had some fans back, and I know you're a Philly guy, and I'm a Knicks guy, so I'm happy to see fans back in the Garden. But, we have these incidents this week. We had Trae Young get spit on. You had the popcorn incident with Russ, and then Jay Morant's family was being harassed. Not a good look for the fans in the NBA with fans returning, right, Coach?
No, it's a horrible look. It's like, I don't know if it kind of goes with where we're at society-wise. Like, people feel like, they're entitled. Because you've spent money on a ticket to go to an NBA game or a baseball game or NFL game or WWE or whatever it is that you go to. I mean, that doesn't give you the right to act the way some of those people acted, the other day.
Yeah, I agree, Coach, and I was so excited to see fans back, and I'm a college football guy, and they're saying that they're going to lift the restrictions, and some of these stadiums might be back to 100,000 people. So I just hope it doesn't give us a bad look, because these fans have been waiting to get back in these arenas, for a long time. But, Coach, let's get into some of these playoff games, and I know you're the Philly guy, and I'll tell you what, Coach, the Philly and Milwaukee right now playing some good basketball in the East.
Yeah, I mean, the Sixers, I think defensively, the way they play, I think, fits well with the playoffs. Strong defensive team. Simmons is probably the best perimeter defender in the league, and Thibault's not far behind. So I think that bodes well, and I also think the draw lines up well for them. Milwaukee, I'm really, really surprised at how badly Miami's played the last couple of games. The first game of that series was a fantastic game, went to overtime. And then Miami has just kind of mailed it in the last couple of games. I thought that would be one of the best first-round series, and so far it's turned out to be the worst. But the Bucks are another team that seems to be clicking at the right time, and the Nets are right there too. So I think it's basically a three-horse race in the East.
Coach, how big of an impact was it when Doc Rivers came to Philly? I mean, Embiid's had, in my eyes, an MVP-type season. I think he could win that MVP, but how much of an impact was it when Doc came to Philly?
Well, I think Doc's part of the puzzle. I think the bigger part of the puzzle, Doc's got credibility in the locker room and, been there, done that, won a championship. So I think that goes a long way. But I think the big thing that happened in Philly is they reconstructed the roster to fit much, much better around Simmons and Embiid. The roster they had last year was really void of shooting. And, Al Horford was like a square peg in a round hole. So, like, Daryl Morey coming in, I think, really was probably – the work that he's done to rebuild that roster was probably as significant or more significant than hiring Doc. But, Doc with his resume and his track record certainly has credibility as well.
And, Coach, many people think that Giannis and the Bucks, this is the year that, they said it could be get to the NBA Finals, or maybe Giannis is on his way out because they just can't seem to get over the hurdle in the Eastern Conference. Do you think that's true? Do the Bucks have to get to the NBA Finals for Giannis to stay, or do you think he'll be around?
Well, I think he's already committed to staying into the next contract. So, it sounds now, unless things really fall apart there, it sounds like he's committed for at least one more contract to the Bucks. So, and they made a good move picking up Drew Holiday. So they have, Giannis and Holiday and Middleton. Collectively, they're not the same level as like Irving and Durant and Harden with the Nets, but that's a pretty formidable first three. And Milwaukee's in an interesting spot because I think the last couple of years there was a lot of expectation with them having the best record in the league, and they fell short of that in the playoffs. Whereas this year they've kind of slid somewhat under the radar and seem to be peaking at the right time.
And, Coach, Jason Tatum, a big night last night, dropped 50 on the Nets, and I was just telling the guys before we came on the air this morning, I feel like if Jason Tatum doesn't score 40, 50 a game, they got no shot to beat the Big Three. Do you think it's a cakewalk? Do you think that Brooklyn walks to the NBA Finals? I mean, with Philly and Milwaukee playing as good as they can they be beaten a 7-game series?
I mean, I think Milwaukee or Philly has a legitimate chance to beat them. I think the Sixers and the Bucks are both a little better defensively, and the deeper you get into the playoffs, the more the game grinds somewhat. To be honest with you, Tatum was phenomenal last night. I think I can't see Boston really extending that series to 6 or 7 games, but and you're spot on. If he doesn't get 45, 50 points, especially without Jaylen Brown, the Celtics aren't even competitive. But Brooklyn, in terms of raw talent, raw offensive talent, and guys who can score, they are probably the most formidable lineup in the league.
And, Coach, I'm a huge Brad Stevens guy. I always talk about him on this show, and I always say, man, I wish he was back in college. I loved him at Butler. At Indiana, threw him the kitchen sink, and he still turned it down. Do you think someday we'll see him back in college, or do you think he's an NBA guy? Hard to say. I think right now, he's an NBA guy, although it'll be interesting to see, there's a lot of scuttlebutt the second half of the season that he may be on his way out in Boston, which is it's kind of strange. Like a couple of years ago, people were, I think, building him up as maybe the best coach in the NBA, which I thought was a gross overstatement. But I think that now, firing him in Boston would be a mistake too. I can see him taking another NBA job. If the Celtics were to let him go after the playoffs, I think he won't be out of work for long. But there's something to be said for the NBA coaching life in that it's all basketball. Yeah.
In college, you don't have to deal. In college, you're a PR guy, you're a fundraiser, you have to deal with the alumni, you have to recruit, which is 75% of the job. And so Brad Stevens might be the kind of guy that he likes the idea of just being a basketball coach.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think we're starting to see that even in the football game with these college coaches. We'll see what Urban Meyer does in Jacksonville. But, Coach, I'm a Knicks guy, and it's so nice to see the Garden back with playoff basketball, the Knicks getting into the playoffs, and Coach Thibodeau, who I think a lot of people, when he got there, he's a defensive-minded coach, and without Derrick Rose, they're struggling to score. But how much is the NBA better with the Knicks relevant again?
Well, the Garden was awesome the other night. I don't really have a dog in that fight between the Knicks and Atlanta, but that series has been really entertaining. I thought the atmosphere when with the full house in the Garden was terrific, and good for New York basketball fans who have been starving for success from the Knicks for a long time, and good for the league as a whole. But I think they're in a little trouble against Atlanta. I think Atlanta's they're the more skilled team with more weapons, and the Knicks got to get more out of Randall. And the other thing is, I really think, Nate McMillan, if you follow me on social media, I think he's one of the really underrated coaches in the league. And
absolutely.
He's done a tremendous job turning the Hawks around.
And, Coach, when you look out west, you look at Ty Lue and the Clippers, who I think so far have been a disappointment. I'm not ruling them out against Dallas, but I think Dallas looks to be, the better team. How about the expectations for the Clippers coming in with Ty Lue? They got to be disappointed down 2-1.
Yeah, and they were down 2-1, and they were down 20 early last night. It really, it looked like they were about to be finished. And to their credit, they kind of were able to turn last night around and win on the road. And so I think Game 4 in that series is really going to dictate, who emerges. If the Clippers can manage to win again in Dallas and recapture home court, all of a sudden they're in a pretty good spot in that series. But Dallas really they got another phenomenal game out of Doncic, but they really didn't get much out of the supporting cast last night. And Paul George played well for the Clippers last night, and Paul George has had kind of the rep of underachieving in the playoffs. And, last night that didn't happen. He and Kawhi really stepped up and brought that team back. So it'll be interesting. I think if the Clippers don't get to at least the Western Finals, the season's a disappointment for them. Yeah,
I agree. And, Coach, we switch series here and we go to the young Memphis team and John Morant. And, man, I'll tell you what, for an 8th seed, they're not scared to play anybody. They've looked pretty good so far early against Utah.
Yeah, I mean, I was really surprised that they were able to go in there and win Game 1 the way they did. And, it's one of the youngest rosters in the league. And John Morant is really, I think he and Trae Young are kind of the two guys so far in the playoffs that have emerged as, like, that next set of great players. So he's been phenomenal. And if you're a Memphis fan, you got to be excited about where that team is headed. It's one of the youngest rosters in the league. And I don't think they're going to beat Utah over 7 games. I mean, I think Utah has too much at both ends of the floor. But the way the Grizzlies have competed, I think, it really bodes well for their future.
Yeah, and then I think this has got to be the first time, Coach. I think a 7th seed is favored to be the 2 seed, and the Lakers with AD and LeBron coming back from injury, they still look like they're catching their stride. But when they're in full stride right now in the West, I don't know who's the toughest challenge. I mean, I don't think it's a walk they get through this first series, but Phoenix needs a healthy Chris Paul, which right now it doesn't look like they're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of feel a little bit for Chris Paul because he was in a situation a couple of years ago with Houston where they had the Warriors on the ropes, then he got hurt, and now Phoenix has had a phenomenal year. I mean, they were really the best team in the bubble when play resumed back last fall. Then they add Chris Paul and have a phenomenal season, and for your reward, you get the Lakers in the first round, which is kind of a tough draw. But, I agree. The Lakers are hitting stride, and, as long as LeBron and Davis continue to get more in sync and stay healthy, I think they're still the favorites in the West. The flip side there is there's a lot of tread worn off those tires. Like, they played all the way to the finals last year. Both guys got, missed some time during the season this year. So, whether the Lakers can stay healthy for a complete run, I think, is probably the most important factor, in how far they go.
And, Coach, the last series, the Denver-Portland series, Denver up 2 games to 1. Portland, unlike many teams, haven't had an answer for the Joker, but that's turned out to be a pretty good series, too. I can see this one going 6 or 7.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think coming in, I thought that would be one of the better series, and it's kind of playing out that way. I think, Denver, Joker's probably going to be the MVP, although personally I'd like to see Embiid get it, but I think Embiid probably missed too many games. But, Jokic he has kind of confirmed his status as an elite player, and then, Portland, they're guard dominant. Lillard is, is an exceptional player. I can see that. I agree 100%. That could go 6 or 7 games, and I think it's really a pick-em series at this point.
Coach, last question. I'm actually pulling for Philly to get to the NBA Finals. I'd love to see Philly in the Lakers. I think the Lakers will still find a way to come out of the West. If it's not your Sixers, is it Brooklyn that comes out of the East?
I would say I'm going to go with Milwaukee if it's not the Sixers. I like the way the Bucks are playing, and they don't have the pressure on them this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Coach. I'm pulling for anybody but Brooklyn. I'm not a big fan of the Big Three. I respect them, but their offense, they don't play much defense, and I'd love to see Philly get in there. I'm a big Doc Rivers guy, so I'm all for it, Coach.
Well, that's good. I think a couple of us. So love to see. It's been a while suffering through the process, so it'd be nice to see the Sixers make a deep run here.
Well, Coach, listen, we appreciate you taking us through the playoffs, and as I always say, we love having you on, and I appreciate you coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always great to talk with you guys.
Thanks, Coach. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.
You too.
That was Coach Dave Pasiak. He comes on all the time to talk some college basketball and NBA with us. Big Sixers fan. Great to follow on Twitter. I think Philly, something about this Philly team. I think Milwaukee, like he said, is playing better. They're playing with a chip on their shoulders. They don't have the pressure now with the Big Three in Brooklyn. So we'll see how. So we'll see how that Eastern Conference plays out. But listen, we got to take our last break. When we come back, we'll wrap things up. I still want to talk some NBA playoffs. We'll still take time for. We got a little bit to keep the phone lines open. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Mohawk Valley Sports Watch on WKAL Talk Radio 1450. We'll be right back.
All right, guys. guys. We're ready for our Four Seasons sunroom, and Daddy's gonna get a rec room with refreshments.
Oh, no. We'll be sleeping under the stars.
Mom, what about the one with, the fun?
Nice try, little bro. It's a gym. My gym. Hey, Grandma's getting her Four Seasons garden room. Weather tight and still like